SummerSlam 1991. A match made in heaven and a match made in hell, as Vince McMahon likes to call it. The real American Hulk Hogan and his fighting for American rights against the Iraqi sympathizers, Sergeant Slaughter and General Adnan, had gotten old, very, very, very old at this point. But to flog the dead horse, the WWE brought back former champion Iron Sheik, the Iron Sheik, and renamed him Col Mustafa to team up against the real American Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. Now, I haven't really picked on any of the other early wrestling storylines from 85 to 1990, but because they worked. But this did not work. This storyline was absolute crap. The Iraq War wasn't really a big event, and it was over by the time SummerSlam 1991 happened. Speaking of SummerSlam 1991, that's what we're going to talk about today. We start out with a six-man tag team match. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith, and the Texas Tornado teaming up and taking on against. Teaming up, and they're fighting against, there we go, Warlord and the tag team. I thought that was last year's in 1990, Power and Glory, which was Paul Roma and Hercules Hernandez. The first thing that you will notice is Steamboat. What the heck is he wearing? I don't think he is referred to by name, just by his monk here, the Dragon, which is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And spends most of the time in the ring as he is getting beat up a lot. The weak link in this match is Paul Roma, and he gets body crossed by Steamboat for the pin. It's an okay starter, but there's talent in this match that could have had better separate matches. And surprisingly, this is Paul Roma's last pay-per-view. And Ricky Steamboat leaves shortly thereafterwards. Next up, we follow that match with quite possibly one of the greatest Intercontinental Championship matches of all time. You get Bret the Hitman Hart against Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig. Mr. Perfect, for one pay-per-view only, has Coach as his manager, who does very little. What makes this match excellent is probably not the wrestling itself, but the way Mr. Perfect bumps throughout. Mr. Perfect spins and gets crotched into the ring post like it's nobody's business. Perfect smacks Bret off the apron at one point and then tries to get him back into the ring, flinging him into the cameraman, and Bret kicks out at 2. The match ends when Bret perfectly applies the sharpshooter. Mr. Perfect had an injured back already, so he immediately had to submit, and Bret Hart is your new Intercontinental Champion. And surprisingly enough, this was Bret Hart's debut as a singles wrestler, and he did a hell of a job of it as his first singles matchup. All right. Next up, we get another tag team match. The Bushwhackers, Luke and Butch, and Andre the Giant in their corner, facing up against the Natural Disasters, Earthquake, and somebody else. I forget who the other guy was. The Bushwhackers, oddly enough, keep control throughout most of the match and actually put on an intelligent fight more than usual. The match ended rather predictably when Butch gets caught in Earthquake's vertical splash, and after the match, the Disasters threatened to beat up Andre when the Summertime Vigilance, the Legion of Doom, even the odds. And that is the second consecutive SummerSlam the LOD has come to ringside to help someone out. They're not actually in a match, but they come out to help somebody out. Now we get a match that I was really looking forward to when I first heard about this match. Virgil against the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, for the $1 Million Championship. Now, the reason why I was looking forward to this match was, one, that Virgil was Ted DiBiase's former employee, and two, the $1 Million title was on the line. That's only been defended, 3 times, and yeah, this was one of the first. I think this was the first time it was ever defended. So, Virgil starts off burning starts off pretty hot and applies the $1 Million Dream, but Ted DiBiase, manager, sensational Sherry, hits Virgil with the purse, and the bell rings, teasing a disqualification. The referee wants Sherry away from the ring, and the match continues. Rowdy Piper did his commentary all throughout the night, but he sells this match okay. A nice interplay between him and Ted DiBiase when Ted mocks Piper, even after every move he executes on Virgil. Ted takes advantage of the ref being on the floor by taking the turnbuckle pad off. However, Ted gets sent into it head first, and Virgil gets the pin 1, 2, 3. And Virgil's success proves to be his downfall, as the WWF doesn't know what to do with his character afterwards, and soon becomes a job to the stars. But he becomes the $1 Million Champion as a result. There you go. We get the Big Boss Man against the Bounty in a jailhouse match. I've seen this match a few times, and I couldn't really get into it. Jacques Rougeau was okay as the Mountie. I was a fan of the Mountie growing up. Excuse me. And the biggest surprise was the Mountie kicking out of the Boss Man Slam, but he gets pinned after the Alabama Slam. Alabama Jamma, as Big Boss Man liked to call it. I think most of us were interested in the conclusion of the match better than the match itself. That's just me. That's what I think. Next up, the LOD was in the match this time. We get LOD, the Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal against the Nasty Boys. Who was it? Nasty Boys. That was, shit. Anyway, the Nasty Boys. A no disqualification, no count-out match for the tag team titles. Sags, and I think the other one was, Sags and forget it. Sags does his usual most of the rule breaking at the start, spraying something in Hawk's eyes, and then hitting over the back with what appears to be a tray of drinks. It becomes more gentle and settles into a tag team match. The match ends when the Nasty Boys both get hit on the head by Jimmy Hart's helmet, and the Doomsday device on Sags secures the pin. Oh, Knobs, that was the other guy. Sags and Knobs, the Nasty Boys. To secure the pin to become the new tag team champions. This match really should have played out like an ECW Tornado tag team match, but that's just how it ended. We get next up Greg the Hammer Valentine against the IRS Man. I think this is the only time where we hear Greg the Hammer Valentine's ring music. I think the Hammer, I wasn't really that big of a fan of Greg the Hammer Valentine, but this match is really slow, and really slow even by his standards. And IRS stalling makes it even worse. The match ends when the Hammer gets gets insulated by a cradle, trying to apply the figure 4 leg lock, and that's pretty much it. This is almost the end of the line for Greg the Hammer Valentine, and was pretty much used in the WWF after 1988, and this is the result as to why. And that brings us to the main event. Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior versus Sergeant Slaughter, Col Mustafa, and General Adnan in a handicap match, with Sid Justice being the special guest referee. 4 years after the first SummerSlam, and they have to concoct another "is the ref biased or not" subplot. This match is hopeless for so many reasons. Well, for one, the context is out of place because the Gulf War finished months before. 2, the feud was stale as Hogan already pinned Sergeant Slaughter at WrestleMania 7. 3, everybody in the match performed absolutely horribly. And 4, despite being a handicap match, despite the handicap rules, did the WWF really think of the Triangle of Terror would pose such a challenge to Hogan and Warrior, especially since Hogan and Warrior beat 5 better mid-carders previous Survivor Series? 5, Warrior and Hogan were obviously stronger. Were obviously the stronger side, yet Hogan still had to cheat to win. Win the match with his victory powder. And 6th, and most notably, the Ultimate Warrior and his money demands backstage with Vince McMahon and how he fired him, and he should have stayed fired, but oh well. This is the 3rd out of the 4 SummerSlams to have a tag team as the main event format, but this was tough to watch and a clear sign that Hulkamania was running out of steam. And now, the main event segment, we have the privilege of attending Macho Man Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth's wedding, even though they were actually married for real in 1986, but it's SummerSlam. It's just an elaborate way of setting up a feud between Jake the Snake Roberts and Macho Man. One question though, why does Gene Okerlund refer to the bride and groom as Mr. and Mrs. Macho? Kind of strange. So yeah, that's SummerSlam 1991. Out of 10, I'm going to rate this a 3. Best match of the night, hands down, is the Intercontinental title match. And the worst match was probably Greg the Hammer Valentine and the IRS Man. That is SummerSlam 1991. Coming up next, SummerSlam 1992.